So here's the proclamation that was sent out from the White House last weekend. Invocation of the Alien Enemies Act by the President of the United States of America. This is the proclamation in which Donald Trump invoked a law from the 1700s that says when we're at war, the president can immediately deport and jail anyone his administration picks. In this case, picks as belonging to a Venezuelan criminal gang, which is something that has nothing to do with wartime. But regardless, they put this out, and there's Donald Trump's signature on the proclamation. Within hours of that proclamation, the Trump administration put hundreds of people on planes bound for a prison in El Salvador. And they had no legal process at all. People were just grabbed, chained, and sent to a foreign prison. A federal judge blocked any further flights like this and spent the week repeatedly grilling Trump administration lawyers about it. He said on Friday, quote, "Why was this proclamation essentially signed in the dark on Friday night or early Saturday morning, and then these people rushed onto planes? I mean, it seems to me the only reason to do that is if you know it's a problem and you want to get them out of the country before suit is filed." Donald Trump, a couple hours after the judge said that, was asked about that when he was departing for yet another weekend of golf, this time at his New Jersey golf club. So he's asked about, why did you sign this in that weird time frame? Why'd you sign it in the dark in that way? Watch what Trump said in response. This was super weird.
I don't know when it was signed because I didn't sign it. Other people handled it. But Marco Rubio's done a great job, and he wanted him out, and we go along with that.
I don't know when it was signed because I didn't sign it. You sure, big guy? Because you're trying to blame Marco Rubio here, but that is not Marco Rubio's signature. Do you not remember signing it? Did you not sign it? Somebody else put your name there? When the White House was asked about Trump saying he totally did not sign that proclamation with his signature on it, the White House came up with a novel explanation. They said, and I quote, "President Trump was obviously referring to the original Alien Enemies Act that was signed back in 1798. Oh, yes, obviously. The President of the United States, obviously, just thought he was being asked whether he signed a document more than 200 years ago. And his answer was, no, other people handled that. Isn't Marco Rubio wonderful? He was talking about 1798. This proclamation at question is ostensibly the legal underpinning for this whole deportation operation, this sending flightfuls of people to a prison in a foreign country. Trump's denial that he ever signed it is now obviously part of the ongoing legal fight. The ACLU telling the judge in this case in its latest filing today, quote, "There is now confusion as to when the proclamation was issued and whether the president signed it at all." Today, the Trump administration took this fight to an appeals court in Washington. They want to resume more flights like this, like the one to El Salvador. It's not clear how the appeals court will rule or when. But meanwhile, the Trump administration just tonight has filed notice that it is invoking the state secrets privilege, meaning they are claiming that for national security reasons, they don't need to provide the court any information about these deportation flights. Even as we still don't know who they deported, and even as attorneys and family members of the people they put on those flights say they can't get in touch with anybody who has been put in this prison in El Salvador. It is an insane story from the very beginning, but it's now approaching surreal. The ACLU lawyer who argued this in court today is going to join us live here next. Stay with us.
If the government says we don't have to give process for that, then y'all could have put me up on Saturday and thrown me on a plane, thinking I'm a member of Nicaragua and giving me no chance to protest it and say somehow it's a violation of presidential war powers for me to say, excuse me, no, I'm not. I'd like a hearing. He wouldn't say that.
Federal appeals court judge today incredulous that the Trump administration could argue they have the right to pick up anyone they want and deport them to a jail in a foreign country with no process at all, no explanation, not even a paper trail. But that is what they're arguing. Joining us now is Lee Gelernt, Deputy Director of the ACLU Immigrant Rights Project. He was in court today arguing against the administration in this case. Lee, Mr. Gelernt, it's nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We've just had news that the Trump administration is invoking the state secrets privilege in this case. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah. So this is just another incredible day in a series of incredible days in this case. The judge said, turn these planes around. This was last Saturday night, I guess, now 8 days ago, when they were in the air because they were headed to El Salvador. And he said, I don't think that this invocation of this 1798 Act is legal. They did not turn the planes around. It was clear that the planes were in the air. This is all public information. They could have turned the planes around. They could have brought people back once they landed. And now the government, rather than answer the judge's understandable questions about what they did, has invoked the State Secrets Act, meaning state secrets privilege, meaning that they're not going to answer the judge's questions. It's really unbelievable in this situation for the government to say, no, we're not going to answer your questions, and we're going to go as far as to call these state secrets facts, even though everyone knows when the planes were in the air.
Lee, what do you make of the fact that the president is now denying having ever signed the Alien Enemies Act proclamation here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it, truthfully, and that's why we filed something in court, as you mentioned, saying that among other facts that we need are what's going on with this. Did the president sign it? When did he sign it? And one thing we do know is that apparently it was signed on Friday, March 14th. They started moving people before they actually published the proclamation on the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, the 15th, which is completely against the way the act is supposed to work. It says a public proclamation. They started using its authority before they even let the public know it had been passed. Now, if the president didn't even sign it, that's yet a whole nother layer of confusing facts that we need to find out.
It's the combination of like the maximum lawlessness and maximum consequences for the people who have been sent there. Yeah. Lee Gelernt, Deputy Director of the ACLU Immigrant Rights Project. Ongoing story. Come back soon. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right. We'll be right back. Joining us this hour. So 250 years ago yesterday, a man stood up in this church in Richmond, Virginia. It's called St. John's Church. It's still there today. It's on East Broad Street in Richmond. 250 years ago yesterday, a man named Patrick Henry stood up in that church in Richmond, Virginia, and he gave a speech that is still remembered now, not just decades or generations later, but literally centuries later. This was, "Give me liberty or give me death." Now, it's not at all clear to historians if Patrick Henry actually said those exact words in that speech that day. Might have been kind of stolen from Shakespeare and later attributed to him. I don't know. But regardless, it was a good speech. It was important. It's credited in part with Virginia choosing to join what would become the Revolutionary War against the tyrannical King George, which is how we got our independence as a nation. It's how ultimately we got our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It is how we got our democracy. And on the occasion of that 250-year anniversary of Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, which again, that 250-year anniversary was yesterday, the current governor of Virginia, Republican Glenn Youngkin, went to that church in Richmond, Virginia yesterday, where they reenacted the whole dramatic speech, including the "Give me liberty or give me death" thing, which may or may not have actually been said in that speech 250 years ago. But still, it's a really nice, important thing to commemorate. 250 years is a big anniversary. It's a nice thing for Glenn Youngkin to have done, right? Then he left. He walked out of the church, and this is what happened. Let me just show you just one more minute of this here. This is from a different angle. And I think this one is helpful because in this angle, you can see him greeting and shaking hands with the men in wigs who have just done the reenactment, smiling and pretending like nothing's going on around him. And then there's kind of this big reveal when he gets down to the SUV that's waiting for him. Watch. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia hearing from his constituents in Richmond, Virginia yesterday, his peaceful and nonviolent but very loud and very angry constituents. You know, because of where we are in the calendar, we are now starting to have lots of commemorations of things related to the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, right? Our revolt against a tyrannical leader who ruled by fiat, the founding of our democracy and our divided system of government with its checks and balances to prevent the emergence of another king. Lots of anniversaries, lots of historical commemorative events coming up on this theme. Just a note, if you are a politician who's going to try to associate yourself with that history, do be aware that your relationship to our current struggles along these lines in this country, to hold on to our democracy, that will undoubtedly be front of mind for many of your constituents. One of the things that is in our original Constitution from the 1700s is the U.S. Post Office. At the end of last week, we covered a bunch of protests all over the country related to the post office, people fighting to save the post office. Trump has said he wants to effectively abolish it. His top campaign donor, Elon Musk, has said it should be privatized. And when we covered this at the end of last week, I thought this was a lot in terms of public response against Trump on the post office, people standing up to defend the post office. That was the end of last week. Turns out that was nothing compared to what happened this weekend. In our production system here on this show, we can do something on screen that's called a two box that shows two pieces of tape simultaneously at once. I sometimes drive everybody nuts by asking for a four box, which shows four pieces of tape at once. In order to cover the Postal Service protests, we've had to create something we've never done before. It's a 20 box. To even start to show you how many demonstrations and protests there were this weekend just of people defending the U.S. Post Office. This isn't even all of them, but this is as many as we can squeeze onto a screen. I mean, we saw protests in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the first Postmaster General was Ben Franklin, and in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania as well, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and San Jose, California, and Los Angeles, California, and Providence, Rhode Island, Seattle, Washington, Buffalo, New York, Charlotte, North Carolina, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Cleveland, Ohio, Melbourne, Florida, Newark, Delaware, Denver, Colorado, Washington, D.C., San Antonio, Texas, Omaha, Nebraska, Roanoke, Virginia, Las Vegas, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Decatur, Georgia, Fort Wayne, Indiana. In Indianapolis, we had to put them up twice because there were two in Indianapolis. In Boise, Idaho, there was a protest to defend the post office on Sunday alongside all these other ones. But in Boise, that followed this additional big protest in Boise on Saturday at the state capitol in Ruby Red, Idaho. At this protest at the state capitol in Idaho, people showed up to defend public lands and the national parks, including some people who showed up in Idaho to that event on horseback. There were other protests this weekend to defend public lands and the national parks at Mount Rainier this weekend in Washington State, and at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee, and in Florissant, Colorado, and in Calabasas, California. See the signs there? Rehire our rangers. In San Luis Obispo, they were protesting for public lands and to preserve the California coast, where Trump is now demanding oil drilling off the California coast. This sign will stick with me from San Luis Obispo this weekend. It's got Smokey Bear, and it says, "Only you can resist fascist liars." As President Trump and his Attorney General and Republicans of all stripes have spent the past couple of weeks trying to intimidate Americans out of specifically protesting against the car company owned by the president's top campaign donor, the American people this weekend showed in very large numbers that they are not going to be dissuaded from peaceful, legal, nonviolent protest for or against anything they want. Because we don't need to clear that with the government. Because we are Americans, and it is our right to peacefully protest if we want to. Look at this. This is Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Look at the size of the protest here. This is just a passerby filming this from his own car as he drove past, and he's driving like at speed, right? But the protest is so big, it goes on for so long, it ends up being kind of a long video in order to try to capture the numbers of people who are out just at this one Tesla dealership in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The organizers of that protest in Cherry Hill say they think there were 600 or 700 people out at this one protest at this one Tesla dealership just this weekend. Look, it's still going. There were Tesla dealership protests this weekend in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in Arlington, Virginia, and in Bartlett, Tennessee, and in Franklin, Tennessee, and in Boston, Massachusetts, and in New York. New York City has a Tesla dealership. There's a very large protest at the Tesla dealership in New York City this weekend. In Chesterfield, Missouri, there was a protest at the Tesla dealership. In Chicago, Illinois, in Rockville, Maryland, in Pasadena, California. There was a big one in Pasadena, California this weekend. There has been most weekends in recent weeks in Pasadena. In Washington, D.C., their now recurring protest at their Tesla dealership regularly has a DJ. And at the Washington, D.C. Tesla dealership, people are dancing because they are billing this as the Tesla Takedown Dance Party, weekly in Washington. At the Tesla protest this weekend in Austin, Texas, this sign stuck with me. Porsche fast, Ferrari faster, Tesla, well, you can read it. I never thought that fastest was an imperfect homophone for fascist, but I guess it is, and now I can't stop thinking about it. This weekend in Kalamazoo, Michigan, people turned out for a hands off our Social Security protest. In Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and in Virginia Beach, Virginia, people turned out to protest against Trump and Musk and the cuts to the federal government. Same thing in Westwood, California, where Congresswoman Maxine Waters turned out in support, as she has for many of the protests that have happened in her district. In terms of town halls with members of Congress, or without them, when people turned out anyway, even though their member of Congress wouldn't come, there's been almost too many of them happening right now to sum them all up. And they're starting to get more attention in the media, and so you may have seen some of the coverage of these elsewhere. I will just tell you, as a person who has been watching this stuff pretty closely for pretty much 8 weeks now, my impression of what's going on with the town halls in particular is that, number one, we're seeing the number of these types of events just explode, including in places you would not necessarily expect to see them. These are definitely not like a blue state liberal area phenomenon. They are that, but they are also everywhere else in the country. You're also, number two, seeing the numbers of people turning out for these things just go through the roof. You're seeing that when Democrats are going to Republican districts to hold town halls where the Republicans won't do it. You're seeing it where Democrats are holding their own town halls, and you are seeing it where they can't get a member of Congress to come to the town hall at all, but Americans just show up. Americans are showing up all over in big and increasing numbers. We are starting to see these numbers both of events and of bodies, and the number of people turning out on individual events, I think, tip over into something that's qualitatively different than what we had previously seen. I'll show you just a little bit of what I mean just from this weekend. Mishawaka, Indiana, right? Not a place we've ever covered here on this show before, but look, hundreds of people turned out to protest against their Republican Congressman Rudy Yakim. I think that's how you say his name. He's refusing to meet with them. And so here in Indiana are his constituents. Ogden, Utah, hundreds of people protesting against their Republican Congressman Blake Moore, demanding that Republican Congressman Blake Moore stand up to Trump. Look at this event, Columbus, Ohio. Jen Psaki had Sherrod Brown on her show tonight talking about organizing in Columbus. Look at this in Columbus, a huge event demanding that Republican Ohio Senator.
A Dying Planet, The Last Harvest.
In the year 2060, Earth is a shadow of its former self, choked by pollution, endless concrete, and abandoned by nature. Only a small fishing village by the sea has managed to preserve the planet's last untouched forest. In this dying world, June and Wynn, two young girls and the last children in their village, cling to the remnants of hope and innocence. Wynn roams the forest, collecting the season's last harvest, while June sings songs that echo with a haunting beauty through the village.
For more, click Linktree in profile.
The Park of Secrets.
In the year 2060, near the heart of Florida, just a stone's throw from Disney World, stood a theme park unlike any other, a place known as the House of Secrets. It was a magical park, much like a state fair, filled with towering rides, carnival games, and parades that drew people from all over the world. But among the grand Ferris wheel and the colorful day parade, there was one attraction that outshined them all, the parade princess, a mesmerizing mermaid named Kenya. Kenya was a sight to behold. At 22 years old, fresh out of college, she had the kind of beauty that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her brown skin glowed under the park lights, her hair a stunning mix of purple and pink that cascaded over her shoulders. Little pink hearts adorned her cheeks, and a ribbon of color stretched across her nose. But it wasn't just her beauty that made her special. Her eyes, big and almond-shaped, seemed to capture the hearts of everyone who saw
The future, Daughters of Liberty, a New Dawn. In 2040, the United States was a fractured nation, still reeling from the fallout of Project 2025, the catastrophic policy that had allowed a resurgence of systemic oppression. The Deep South had seceded once more, forming the antebellum republic, where human trafficking, racial inequality, and gender oppression became tragically normalized. The Second Civil War erupted as the rest of the nation sought to free those trapped in this dystopian regime. After years of bloodshed, Kamala Harris had finally led the Union to victory, restoring a fragile sense of hope. But the battle scars ran deep, especially in places like Louisiana, where the remnants of a broken society still lingered.
For more, click tree link in bio.
Sable's Song, A Siren's Journey to Joy. Once upon a time, in a small, worn-out town in Middle America, there lived a little child named Sable. Born into poverty, Sable's body was frail, so thin that you could see her bones, but her heart was filled with an exuberance that not even hunger could dull. Sable was awkward, with dark, deep-set eyes that sparkled with innocence and wonder. Despite being born a boy, Sable always knew she was different. Inside her lived a girl, bright and effervescent, waiting to bloom.
For more, click tree link in profile.
Bella the Dog from Springfield, a tale of truth and transformation. In the small, charming town of Springfield, Ohio, lived a regal standard poodle named Bella. Bella belonged to Mrs. Vaughn Thursenberg, a well-known figure in the community, always polished, conservative in manner, but a lifelong Democrat. For years, she hosted elegant soirees, engaging in local politics, and treating her home like a kingdom. Bella had grown accustomed to a life of luxury, complete with fancy collars, custom bow ties, and an endless supply of treats from those who adored her. Recently, however, things had changed. Mrs. Vaughn Thursenberg had been watching a lot of Fox News, and it seemed to have swayed her thinking.
For more, click tree link in profile.
I told you. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? 'Cause I told you. And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what did I say will happen when I told you? Exactly what just happened.